Hello and welcome to Paxton Road TV. This is Paxton Road TV's flagship show, Talking Points number 48. And tonight it is about Conte, Paratici and Levy. Has anything changed at Spurs? We are joined in the house. Super special guests. As per usual, we have Mike-Hotspur Hustler, Darius 3K Sid Spurs, and joining us in the house, Jack Pickbrook from The Athletic. Good evening, gentlemen. How are we all tonight, this evening?
Good.
Good.
Fingers crossed we actually have a game to watch. That's all I'm really hoping at the moment.
We do need to talk football at some point in our lives with Spurs, and then games getting called off left, right, and centre. So we do have to hope that tomorrow's game does go on. Before we start, though, if you are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching live, hit the like button, all the rest of that stuff. If you want to get your questions in for any of the panel, get your super chats in, get them in so we can answer the panel on their opinion. So, right then, guys, the topic, as we've talked about, let's just get that back up so we can all see for everybody. Conte, Paratici and Levy. Has anything changed at Spurs? Let's start with you, Mike. So it's safe to say the team. You like that one, didn't you? It's safe to say under Nuno, the team weren't doing too well. Conte's coming, in the summertime has approached, didn't take the job, has now come in the last 2.5 months. For you, what has changed at Spurs in that period of time, since obviously the Nuno? Has anything changed from Mourinho's days?
What a question this is. Has anything changed since Mourinho's days? I think there has, insofar as we have got a director of football within the club, which, if my memory serves me right, and I have got memory blank, but I don't think he was around when Mourinho was around, and we didn't have a director of football during sort of Jose's tenure. I think having a director of football in is the right thing for the football club. I think it's quite a big change in I suppose in direction of where we were to where we want to go to. I think Levy, I can't say he has let the reins loose, but I'm guessing that the only reason you bring in a director of football is, from Daniel's perspective, would be to sort of let that director of football run things on the football side, and he concentrates on the business side, which I'm sure everyone here, even the viewers, etc., would probably agree that Daniel as a businessman and what he's doing with Spurs, from where he took over the club to where he is now as a business, it's great. We're going in the direction that he wants to, I suppose, build us to. But football decisions, etc., has been sort of left wanting at times. But I think it's too early to say, has there been any changes in the club? I think Paratici only came in sort of early summer. And I think he still probably needs at least a season to get his feet under the table. There's a lot of things that need to happen at Tottenham, which isn't gonna happen within a season. So from the director, from his perspective as director of football, I think he just needs time. And as I say, it's going to take more than 6 months to sort of embed what he wants. I'm sure himself and Daniel Levy have a vision, have a plan of where they want Tottenham to go to on the football side of things. But Rome wasn't built in a day. I know we can now argue that we've been waiting for this for, 20 odd years or whatever it is when Levy took over. But I think him appointing Paratici is certainly the right step, the right direction to take. I think you just need to give Paratici a little bit of time just to get his feet under the table properly. And I think after a season or so, we'll start to see changes that we're all hoping for.
Okay. Jack, thank you for joining us here at Paxton. Great to have you. Do you see anything different from Mourinho's tenure to Conte's tenure in that period of time? As Mike said, we gained he's now, I think his title is managing director of football I think he joined July the 1st. But what do you see as the main difference since that appointment and since Conte's come in, if anything?
Well, thanks very much for having me. Really pleased to be on. The main difference really is that Tottenham now have one of the best managers in the world. I mean, that's what Daniel Levy thought he got when he appointed Mourinho. But of course, that in November 2019, that was no longer true of Mourinho. Like anyone who'd followed his time back at Chelsea, his time at Man United, knew that this guy was no longer one of the best in the world. Conte is one of the best in the world. Like he's proved that at Juve, at Chelsea, at Inter. He, in a sense, like Conte really is the manager that Levy thought he was appointing when he appointed Mourinho 2 and a bit years ago. So that is the big difference. And I think that is more important than Paratici being there or the players or whatever. Will that be clear on the pitch? Well, we'll have to wait and see because as Mike said, these things do take a while.
Yeah, and I guess, we're impatient as fans. I think we're all impatient. If you actually think about it, Conte's been in the position just over 2.5 months. Paratici has had one transfer window and half a transfer window so far. So again, to judge them on this time scale, I don't think it's right personally, but we do need to give them time. But again, has there been enough done? The question I'll ask you, Darius, I'll come to you. What improvements then in the style of play have you seen? Has there been enough improvements in the style of play since Conte's been here? We can almost discount the Nuno, and I think we can discount Nuno because I don't think Nuno's on the same sort of level as someone like Conte. Jose Mourinho is, in my opinion. Jose Mourinho might not be at the same time scale. What I mean by that, his best days have gone, but he's certainly still in that bracket of world-class managers. Have you seen enough improvement in the style of play to think, right, going forward, there's enough in this for Conte to say, yep, or for you to say that Conte's made an improvement to the squad?
It's not just the style of play. I think the style of play is one thing, obviously. I was always saying from when Nuno joined, and it was sort of rumoured that it was wanted a 4-3-3 to be played. I always saw that our squad sort of suited a 3 at the back, obviously with Reguilon coming in, and at the time we did have players like Walker Peters who I thought would be a suitable right wing back. There was a thought in me that we actually could play a 3 at the back and actually do quite a good job, obviously with Kane and Son and what they did in that season with Mourinho, obviously as a partnership, and Son was obviously on the left, but they still combined how many times to score an assist for each other. I just thought that sort of a 3-5-2 covers all areas on the pitch and sort of covers any deficiencies that we did have in our team. And again, like I said, the creative midfield role, and Ndombele isn't a sort of known creative midfielder, but he has creative aspects to his game and could have played that role if we needed him to. So for me, the style of play that Conte's brought in and the formation is fine. I'm absolutely happy with it. Sort of the way we build attacks now is very patient, but we can also sort of be very sharp in our balls forward, sort of playing the ball forward. But it isn't just a style of play for me. It's a sort of how he's improved players that we don't know or that we already know are incredible and great players. He's improved players that some of us have doubted for a long time now, and a lot of called for their heads as well. I mean, for me, the main one's Harry Winks. I would never ever thought in my life that I would actually sort of want Harry Winks to come on the pitch again for Tottenham. I was almost writing him off. I've never ever seen Harry Winks make a progressive pass sort of in the past 2 years that he's been playing, and ever since sort of Conte's come in, it's sort of like he's so clear with his instructions and what he wants from his players and his team that the players can just get on with their jobs and their roles and do what they need to do. And again, players like Lucas, who with Nuno weren't sort of getting any goals and assists and still were playing well and working hard, but now Conte, you can clearly see that Conte said you need to play the ball forward, try and play a ball into space, look for the runs of your players. And it's benefited us and it's benefited those players, and they look a lot better now when you have the stats to back it, but you can also have the sort of the visual and the eye test and you can watch the performances and notice who's improved as well. So again, Skip's another example. I even think Reguilon's improved in Session as well. So there's loads of examples of players who looked like they were stagnant in their progression and their ability, but Conte seemed to get another level out of them. So if you can bring in players who are of a better quality and a higher level, what's to say that he can't get even better quality and better levels out of those players? And that just raises the level of everybody else around us as well with competition and squad. So it's what he does with players and also the system as well that he has played, which helps us.
So I'm before I come to you, Sid, I'm obviously very happy when we signed Conte 2.5 months ago, knowing that he is a serial winner, 5 league titles out of the last 6 years. it's going to sound a bit strange, but I still expect to see more. I know, given the level of players that we have in our squad, is not the level he probably expected. I think he was surprised when he come in. Do you think that Antonio should be getting more out of these players, even though, you know, we know that they're not quite at the level that he wants them to be? We vilified Jose for when he had the majority of these players there. There's one or two that have obviously gone and one or two that have come in since that time. But is there enough what you've seen, Sid, to suggest to you that Conte has made significant improvement in how these guys are playing?
I think before he came in, I think the stats said it all, didn't it, in terms of how much running they were doing on the pitch. And as soon as Conte came in, it was like 10 times a lot more. And we became, from going bottom of kilometers on the pitch to becoming one of the top teams of running around on the pitch. So within the first week or two he was there, he's obviously realized, or he's seen, the fitness levels weren't good enough. And straight away, he's adapted or he's adjusted that. And every single player that he picks on game day, he's giving 100%. He knows which players need to lose weight, which players need to, and Ndombele is one of them. He's realized, I need to up his game. Dele Alli, even though he was doing it all in the summer, even now when you see him on the pitch, you still don't think he's that fit enough. The players that he's got to tune out of are the standard players, the Moras, the Kane. Even Kane started off a bit sluggish, but he had Euros, didn't he? So that was the excuse. But slowly but surely, they're all getting fitness. And I personally think, from what I saw last season and what I'm seeing this season under Conte, there is improvement already. They're getting they're covering a lot more on the pitch. I still think, there's still more room for improvement, but with time, with his training methods and his philosophy, he will get everyone on the same page and same fitness levels. But it's going to take a bit of time, because I think he's got about 5 fitness instructors. So, and the problem he's got is not everyone's at the same level of fitness. And that is a big, sort of a big problem for him, because you can't just take them all into one session and say, right, this is what we're all going to do. Because certain players are not to that standard. So he's got to stop it and say, well, hold on, he's on that. He can't do that much. He can't do that much. But I think given the time, he will do what he wants to do. And it's just the players that he wants. Obviously, we know the players that he doesn't want, and the players know themselves. They've just got to give 100% to Conte. And it's like everyone's been saying on here, he's one, and Jack said it as well, he's one of the top managers in the world. So you have to perform for the top manager in the world.
Do you think, though, like the main change that I've seen since Jose's come in is, have we as a football club changed our philosophy in terms of our style of play? Because Jose Mourinho, Nuno, and Conte, albeit different standard of class in managers. You've got 2 world-class managers in there, and you've got Nuno, who, no disrespect to him, but the Tottenham way of football, as young as from the moment I've always sort of supported Spurs, has always been the attacking way. And when you look at how we've played since the Mourinho days to now, that attacking, how can I say, where we were always on the front foot, where we was always like playing that free-flowing attacking style of football, to me, I think that's kind of gone. And that's probably one of the major changes that I've seen. Maybe not since Paratici's come in. So it's unfair to say, well, Paratici's brought in Conte and now we've changed our sort of philosophy in terms of how we play football. But certainly from when Levy appointed Jose, to me, that was very much, it's almost like there's an intent of maybe changing the way the club portrays our style of football, if that makes sense. I don't know what everyone else's thoughts on that, but that to me would probably be the biggest change that we've seen in the club over the last season or two.
So let me just try and answer a little bit of that. I'm always a firm believer in that you should have a club philosophy. Daniel Levy came out before, I think it was before Nuno's appointment, after the Jose debacle, and basically said, we want to have this style of play. We want to get back to the DNA of Spurs, the attacking style of play. But you have to have a philosophy behind it. The managers that have come in don't necessarily support that philosophy. So for me, it should be they should set that. That's that whole philosophy of the club. What do we want to be? Do we want to be an attacking style of club? Do we want to be, possession-based football? What do we want to be? And then you build your infrastructure around that. What I mean by that is your players, your manager, your coaching staff, etc. I'm not quite sure if at the moment we're bouncing between what we're trying to achieve. We had that in Poch. That was let go. We then brought in a serial winner in Jose to try and appease the fans. We weren't winning anything. But then I don't know if we've lost our way in that sort of sense in terms of a philosophy. So I'll ask Jack, do you think there is a clear direction for the club, or are we just kind of almost, trying to, or is the club trying to do things to appease the masses more so than anything else?
That's a really good question. I don't think there is a overarching philosophy apart from whatever Conte and Paratici want. I think that is really what the philosophy is now. It's Antonio Conte trying to impose his style of play in the short term to make Tottenham as good as they can be. I think that the idea that Tottenham have a kind of overarching philosophy which lasts longer than any season or any manager, I think hasn't really been the case since they sacked Pochettino in 2019. Obviously, Mourinho was a huge departure from Pochettino. I think that everyone could tell they didn't really have an identity under Jose. And I know it was very, Daniel Levy obviously came out with this famous Tottenham DNA stuff in May 2021 when he was looking for a new manager to replace Jose. But it doesn't really stand up. I mean, if you look at the things that he identified in that list, I mean, you could say that's a Tottenham DNA, or you could just really say that's basically just what Pochettino had. That was just he was just talking about Pochettino. And the fact that he could then go from that to trying to bring back Pochettino, failing, trying to get Conte, failing, getting Nuno, who is the complete opposite of that. And as much as I admire Nuno as a man, I think he's a really decent, honourable guy. Football-wise, Nuno's just Mourinho football repackaged. So for him to come out with all that stuff about Tottenham DNA and then appoint Nuno and then sack Nuno and go for Conte, who's a different style altogether, just shows there is no overarching philosophy at play here. There's just Daniel Levy reacting and making decisions and Paratici trying to get the best people into the club. And I'm not saying it won't work because you don't, look at Chelsea. Like Chelsea don't have an overarching philosophy. Their philosophy is just whoever the manager they have at that given moment. And they obviously spend more money than Tottenham. They've got better players than Tottenham in the main, but they do win things and it has worked for them. But I do feel like Tottenham are kind of closer to Chelsea really in terms of what they're trying to do rather than having a big long-term philosophy. Because I think, frankly, that's been out the window for a few years now.
Yeah, and I think if you take Chelsea as the example, I think Chelsea have, in my opinion, I think they have a philosophy, but I don't think it's based around a style of football. It's based around success. I think their philosophy is based around we want to win as many trophies of the big trophies in the world, and we're going to put together whatever needs to be done. And if that manager doesn't achieve that with it and even if he does achieve that, they're still going to refresh that process. And you've seen a number of managers that have gone through Chelsea. Us ourselves as Spurs fans have seen a number of managers, but Chelsea's philosophy has been built on the success and continued success with continued spending. So that's where I think they're different to us. From Spurs' perspective, I think it's important that we get some sort of philosophy. I think it's important that we decide what we are as a club, what we are as a team, so you can try and build the pieces. Because I saw in the summertime when we looked at the players that we were bringing in, the likes of Brian Hill, we had the Emersons, we had all of a very young age. Is that going to be the same thing that, Conte is going to want? Is he going to be ready-made players? Is he here for a building process in terms of a long-term? Darius, how do you see that long-term process for Conte?
I don't think Conte really cares about sort of what players are coming through, who sort of is potentially going to be a star and whatever. I just think, like you said, and like Jack said, Conte is sort of the mold of Chelsea. He just wants to win, and he just needs what he needs to win. And if you give it to him, the sort of history shows that he will deliver what you want, and that is trophies. It's just, for me, there's a problem with Tottenham. There's a problem of not really wanting or not knowing what they actually want. And I actually sort of would go back to even way before Poch and look at all the managers before that. And there wasn't really a clear philosophy following any of those managers up until Pochettino came in and sort of started again and tore everything up. So for me, it's not necessarily a bad thing to sort of go from Poch to a different manager, but I could clearly see that there was options, sort of managers like Erik ten Hag, who would have been a more suitable option to follow on from the philosophy from Poch. I think it was a bit of desperation with Mourinho coming in, and obviously with Nuno coming in again. I think that was also just letting Paratici maybe make the final decision in that sense. But what we've got now is could be very successful. It's just it's not a long-term sort of plan, and I don't know if Daniel Levy is going to sort of open up enough of his pockets to allow Conte to have the squad that he needs to win. And you might not actually need as many players as you think, to be honest. I do think that it's sort of just addressing serious areas that are so important to a system for Conte. For example, and I don't really see why everybody gets onto Emerson, because he wasn't a Conte signing. He was bought when Nuno was in charge. So he wasn't bought for Antonio Conte. So if you get a right wing back who is of a quality that is going to create a lot of chances, is going to be sort of very fast in the style of Hakimi, like Inter did. They got Conte Hakimi, who was the ideal wing back for him, and he flourished. And you just need to sort of buy the right players for the system, as opposed to maybe even spend the 70-80 millions on big name players. You don't actually need to do that. It's Conte's proven again with Inter, bringing in players like Ashley Young and Alexis Sanchez. He can work with those players, and again, with that league, it's a lot easier. But again, you just have to sort of accommodate to the league that you're in. So with the Premier League, you bring in sort of bigger, stronger players. Like an example, Dusan Vlahovic, I think would fit into the team seamlessly with Conte because of his stature and because he will be able to suit the Premier League and because he will play in the style that Conte wants to play. So it's not necessarily the biggest names. It's just fitting the system and actually maybe spending more money on potentially like a right wing back who's going to be ideal for Conte's system, as opposed to maybe a big name striker or a big name midfielder who might not necessarily be the perfect player for Conte's system.
So let's try and end this last bit of the section of the show in terms of the Conte side. And I'll just ask Sid this, and then obviously any response from yourself, Mike, as well. Conte said no in the summertime to the job, forgetting the amount of money he's then been offered to take the job. What do you think the message was from the board to convince him to take the Spurs job?
We've had this discussion before, and for him to turn it down in the summer, I personally didn't think he wanted the job in the first place. And whether the little bit of truth that he said that it was too soon to leave Inter Milan and it was too soon to get another job, he still had Inter Milan. What happened there, and it was all in the back of his head, and he didn't want to go straight into a job because he wanted to get over that incident kind of thing. I think that might have a little bit to do with it, but also he probably looked at what was happening at Spurs, and I think he probably thought, not right now, let me see what happens. And then we've gone back in for him after what happened with Nuno, but I think that second time round, I think they've sat down. He has to have sat down and had a conversation, and somewhere along the lines, the transfer or the players must have come into it, because Daniel Levy must have known what he's done at Inter Milan, what he's done at Chelsea. Everyone thinks that he spends loads and loads of money, but actually he hasn't spent that much money at Inter Milan, nor Chelsea. He's not spent like 400-500 million. I think he spent about 100 and something million at each
His
club.
net spend has been pretty good.
He just got players that would fit him. I mean, he wanted Hakimi, he wanted Lukaku, and the Inter board said, okay, you're going to get him, and if you win for us, it'll be worth it. And look what happened. I mean, they still made a profit on him and have bought a player in Dzeko who does the same role. So even if, like you say, you bring in the big players, if you can turn a profit on these players as well, if they live up to the nature and the fashion that you want them to live up to, then it's not actually a risk, because Hakimi was always going to be an elite right wing back. Even if you buy him for 40 million, you're probably going to be able to turn a profit, and he will improve players like that. So it doesn't even seem like a risk to me if you buy the right players with the right character profile for him.
So let me write this comment from Simply Ace here. Conte wants players that are ready to step up and win trophies. If he does not get what he needs, he will leave, and then we are in massive trouble and it will get ugly. What do you think was said then, Mike, to get Conte to stay, apart from the 20 million a year? Potentially. I don't know if he's on that. Just surmising.
I think it is a bit of a mixture of everything. I think maybe that him walking into the Tottenham job may have been a bit too soon, just after he's left the stint at Inter Milan. You could argue maybe, first of all, we didn't offer him enough. Maybe there might have been And I think this is probably, I think this might largely boil down to, or play a huge factor in it, is what was going on with Son and Kane at the time that we approached him. I think their sort of careers and whether Kane was going, whether he was staying, I think that may have played a large part. And I think he probably didn't have the assurances at the time that we went in for him or discussed like the job with him. I don't think that the assurances could be provided that perhaps Conte may have wanted. I mean, you're going to want to keep your best two players if you're going to join the club, and if Spurs can't sort of provide the assurances that he was seeking that we would keep hold of him no matter what, then maybe the job, the task at hand might not have suited him. I mean, it's not going to. Let's put it this way: when we approached him in the summer, whenever that might have been, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that it's going to be a big job that he's got on his hands, and it's not exactly going to be a sort of a walk in the park in terms of, here you go, there's a few $100 million for you to go and spend on what you need. Name your price, we'll go and get. We'll name the players. Don't worry about the price. We'll get them in house. Like you would have done at Chelsea, Inter Milan to a certain extent. I know the net spend hasn't been that bad, but I think he offset some of the players against the purchase that he brought in. But yeah, I think it's gonna. And what the thing is, it's always going to be one of them whereby us fans are just going to always surmise because we're never going to get to the bottom of it unless Conte brings out a book when he's retired or later in his managerial career where he's done what he wants to do in a game and he thinks, I'll write a book about my career as a professional football manager as such. But yeah, I think it's a case of a bit of everything.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything in particular. I think
sorry to interrupt. Let's because we done spend a long time on that one. I didn't think we spent, but that's amount of stuff we've got to talk about. Let's move on to Paratici now. Paratici came out and can't quite give a quote, but he said on Conte's appointment, he believes the club are in a position to win trophies. So, Jack, following Antonio's arrival, what have you seen from the managing directors in terms of his role? What have you seen to support that, I guess, statement, that theory from him? What's he done?
Well, I think it's too early to tell. I think the first thing he did was oversee the sort of second phase of the managerial process, which I think it's fair to say went very badly. He decided not to appoint Fonseca, which might well have been the right choice. I don't know. We'll never know. He then tried to appoint Gattuso, which obviously went very wrong. And I think he really had his fingers burnt with that one. Then they spent a few weeks deciding what to do next and ended up with Nuno, which was clearly a waste of money and time. Even though, Paratici might well say they didn't have many other options at that point, but the fact that they ended up having to appoint Nuno just before the start of pre-season was clearly a complete shambles. So that counts against him. The transfer window in the summer, well, let's wait and see on that one. I think Romero is a good player. I think Brian Gill might be a good player. Not that impressed with Galini. Emerson Royale is probably a good player for a different manager. Obviously they didn't know Conte was coming in at that point, so you can't really blame them for getting in a more defensively minded right back. Pat Matassar might turn out to be a great player. We'll have to wait and see. So yeah, pretty mixed bag in the summer. Didn't have a huge amount of money to play with, we should say. And then, so really, I think it's kind of too early to tell. It might be that this season, Tottenham could end up in fourth, in which case people will say, oh, Paratici's fantastic. He's got them back into fourth. Although how much that's to do with his actual decisions is open to debate. But I think really he's going to have to be judged on this window and the summer window. Tottenham already starting to think about the summer window. I think they accept that it's going to be very difficult this month to get in top players because it always is in January. But if they can get, we all know that Tottenham is still, whatever happens this month, Tottenham is still 3 or 4 players away from being a complete team. If they can get those 3 or 4 guys in the summer, and if they're ready to go in and impress quickly, like Romero, rather than being maybe a bit less convincing like the other guys, then Paratici would have been a success. But right now, I'd say it's all still up in the air.
Okay. How long do you think? How long, Sid? How long do we give Paratici? Do we give him this window and the summer window to see if his credentials are the case? Because when he was appointed, a lot of cynics were saying that it was almost like a shield to be placed in between Daniel Levy and decision making. I'm not quite sure from that cynical point of view. I think there is definitely a role. I was screaming out for that. We wanted, someone who was going to make footballing decisions as opposed to the commercial decisions, which Daniel Levy is very good at. Football side of things, maybe not so good at. But that doesn't necessarily go down to him. I don't know who has the final say. There's a lot of people involved with the transfers, a lot of people in the scouting network. Steve Hitchen's been there for a number of years. How long do we give Paratici to get this right?
So he's obviously, we had the summer window where he was just new into the job, so sort of you can allow him that one. This window, he's already been given a list by Conte. Conte's already told him the kind of players that he wants, and he knows the kind of players that Conte wants because they worked at Milan together as well. So he knows. For me, this window and summer window are massive because, like Jack said, if we want to progress, we're 4 odd players short. We need to get rid of certain players, but we're about 4 or 5 players short of trying to get up top 4, challenging, trying to get into Champions League spot. And I think that the list he's got or given, it must be longer than my arm because the amount of players Conte must have told him, I want him, I want him, I want him. At some point, he's going to have to deliver because if he doesn't deliver anyone this window, Traore is not somebody, to be fair, that a lot of Spurs fans want. It might be a quick fix kind of thing. But I personally don't even think he's on top of Conte's list, even though everyone's saying he's top of their list. I think he's just limited to having him because he's only 20 million or potential loan deal with buying in the summer. However, summer, if we get 1 or 2 players now, good. And then we go into the summer transfer market and we don't move players out. And most importantly, if we don't get players in the summer, then people will start looking at Paratici and saying, wait, what are you doing? You've had now almost 3 windows to get top-notch quality players into the club. I know Daniel Levy is going to be limiting him somewhere along the lines, but if you can't get your 100 million, 75 million pound player, then there's other players on that list which he has to then go out and try and get. Everyone's got a preferred number 1 choice, but you need to have a second and a third choice if possible. And he has to then try and do whatever he can to get these players because Conte will tell him, I want this player.
So I'll add to that. Sorry, Mike. I was just and you can answer the point if you want. We saw in the summer there was all this, and again, when you go onto social media, everybody's up and down with it. Paratici was notoriously involved with 4, 5, 6, 7 transfers per position, and everybody was saying, "How can he do that? That's his style." But he did that when he was at Juve. He's done that previously. That doesn't seem to be the case this window. Has something changed in terms of the way he's going about his business? Has it had to change because he's now at Spurs? And if that's the case, what are we likely to see this month? What are we likely to see this month from transfers?
I think I've said it. His limitations have changed. Daniel Levy has told him, you ain't going to get pockets loads of money that you got at Juventus, Inter Milan and Chelsea. I ain't going to give you that much money because Joe Lewis is doing whatever he's doing and I ain't going to give you that. So he's now looking at not financing big deals. So he's got sort of like from shopping in Harrods, he's got to now start shopping in
not Primark.
Not Primark, no. But what I'm saying is from Harrods, he's now probably looking at John Lewis kind of stuff. You know what I mean? From high end to sort of couple of notches down because he's not going to get them kind of players. And the players that we're looking at, the Vladovic's and people like that, you know that bigger clubs are going to come in and just say, right, there you go, extra 20 million. Thank you very much. So he's limited.
But there's still plenty of sort of options in the free market with a director of football who's renowned for sort of shopping in that market. I do think there are opportunities to be taken. It's just making that right decision and almost maybe not expecting the big names all the time. And I don't think there's a problem with not bringing in big names. I think that you could have a
As long as they're the
philosophy
right
where
players.
you can be the team that makes the big names, that gives the people the chance and sell them on for a profit and work on that model. It's not to say that you're a smaller club in any sense. It's just Tottenham Hotspur don't have the pool that these big clubs have that we want to think that we have, and it's not any sort of slight on Tottenham. It's just truth and facts. Man United's, Man City's, Chelsea's, even teams that aren't doing as well, like Juventus at the moment, AC Milan, who weren't doing very well at the moment, will always still be able to attract big name players because of the history of their club. And unfortunately, because we don't have a lot of recent history, we have to operate in a different market. There's not a problem with that. It's just like you said, and like Sam said, the infrastructure has to be good enough so that you actually can find and locate these players before, again, the big clubs do, or before, like, you know, all the Dortmunds and Ajaxes of the world do that. So it's just being smart in the market. I think Tottenham haven't been smart. I think Ndombele, again, you could look at that and say that was probably a rushed or a bit of a decision made after getting into the Champions League final. Sort of no signings made. You just need to get a big name in. I just think that Spurs need to be a bit smarter in the market and shop for players who could actually have an impact, but also have value. So if you don't work out, you can sort of, as bad as it sounds, just sort of flip them for a profit and maybe try again. It sounds bad, but a lot of teams look in that way. Chelsea, again, they get their money from building an academy that's good enough to sell those players. Mark Guehi, who never played for the Chelsea team, was sold for about 25 million. So, I mean, there's ways to make money in the market as opposed to just sort of selling and not just, you know, buying the best players.
But you can't just judge for Paratici coming in. You can't just judge him on one specific area. You can't just be judging him on transfers, because I think the issues at Spurs are much bigger than that. Like, first of all, I think he's got to attack the mentality of the club, change the mentality completely, because we're not a winning. We haven't got that winning mentality. So for me, that would be the first thing: change the mentality of the club.
I think we've got the right manager to change that though. Now
I think we've got the right footballer director.
So I'll ask the question: is that the job of the managing director of football to change the mentality, or is it higher up than that, or is it the manager? I'm not quite sure if it's just one person's. It's in one person's remit to do that.
No, but he sets the tone, doesn't he? You set the tone at the director of football. Surely sets the tone from up above, and then everything else. That it's like a domino effect. If you set the mentality, you want a winning mentality at the club. You set like a domino effect where that sort of you breed it into within the club, and that's why I think with Paratici, you can't just judge him on a transfer window. There's more to a director of football than that. I mean, first of all, you could look at the recruitment over the years. I think our recruitment probably needs to change, and he needs to stamp his authority on that and change how like our scouting, our recruitment process. That all needs to change. Then you could look at our academy, which how many players can we, off the top of our heads, name that's come out of the academy who are as good as what you see? You look at Chelsea's. It's like a conveyor belt, and we just haven't got that volume of players whereby they're of that quality that could go off and play in another Premiership football team, and then Chelsea can recall them, whether it's at the end of the year, whether it's in January, whatever. And then those players like Gilmore's, Gallagher, they could probably go back into Chelsea end of the season and hit the ground running.
And that's the thing, Mike. And then even if they don't, you send them on loan and they have a good year, and you can sell them for a very, very good price.
Money, yeah.
But this is where I think you can't just judge Paratici on the transfer window. The transfer window is a part of it, but he needs to change. He needs to breed a different mentality into this club. He needs to change recruitment, the scouting network. He needs to look at the academy.
Let me ask the question, and let me answer that question for Jack as well to answer. What else is on the roles and responsibilities of Paratici? Mike's mentioned about, you know, the academy. We've talked about players transfer. His title is managing director of football. That's quite a broad-ranging title. What else does he need to be involved in? Does he need to do to get the success that's required at Spurs?
Yeah, you're right. It is a really big job title. I think the idea really was that Daniel Levy would step back from the football side of the club and let Paratici run the whole football side of the club. That's how it was sold to Paratici when they agreed to get him in back in sort of May, June of last year. And I do think Levy's been good to his word. Like Levy, you know, when Jose was manager, Levy would be at the training ground all the time talking to him. That hasn't been the case so much this season. Paratici is really, all the players understand that Paratici is in charge at the training ground. If they've got an issue, they go to him rather than to Levy. Paratici would be the one who has the day-to-day relationship with Nuno and now with Conte. So in obviously Levy still has an involvement. Levy was very much involved in the decision to replace Nuno with Conte, for example. Levy would have final sign-off on transfers, for example, and how much money there is to spend. But in terms of day-to-day operations, it is all down to Paratici. How Paratici can actually raise the standards, which is what people are talking about. I mean, that is a very easy thing to say and a very difficult thing to do in practice. I know that when they got him in, there were hope that he could drive what they call, like Juventus standards. Juventus obviously won the lot when Paratici was there, and people hoped that he could kind of bring some of that sort of Juventus best practice, professionalism, efficiency, modern methods to Tottenham. Although, as ever with this kind of thing, it's the proof will be in the pudding, won't it? Because we won't know really, I think, for a year or two whether there has been that rise in standards under Paratici that everyone was hoping for.
Yeah. So, what do you think Paratici sees so far? Does he? If you was him, how would you mark so far as being in charge of Spurs? And the reason I say that is because we're all getting this. Oh well, we've got into this part of the transfer window. It looks like Daniel Levy's not backing him. Paratici's not getting what he wants. He's not able to do this. How do you think he sees it? Do you think it is a case as what we've talked about? It's got to be a time thing, or are there certain things that when he was assured the job that he's expecting to see happen now? And I'm saying this about the transfer window specifically in terms of this January transfer window, because I think we all know we need players, but same old at the moment in time. What do you think Paratici's thinking?
You know what? I think he's probably walked into that club knowing what needed to be done. And everyone guesses what's going on, what's he doing, whatever. Nobody knows what he's actually doing behind the scenes. We just listen to what people are saying. We listen to social media, what the papers are saying. We don't actually know on a day-to-day basis what he's doing. For all we know, everything what Jack, Mike, and you have said, he might have already had the ball rolling on that. He might have already all started going and it's progressing slowly. But we don't know that because we're too busy concentrating on getting players out of the club, getting new transfers in, or you haven't bought a player for this time, you haven't bought a player for that time. January is always a hard window to get the players in. Now, the caliber and the type of players Conte wants, he's probably not going to be able to get that in this window because a lot of
Conte's alluded to that. Conte said it's expected to be a hard window, which shows to me he's not expecting loads. Yeah, but I do think he's expecting something.
Oh, I mean, that's it. The main top targets, right? I don't think he's going to be able to get. No matter how good you are, you can be Paratici or anyone else. This window is even for the top directors, footballs or whoever. It's hard to get a player in. However, Conte will have given him a list, and I'm sure Conte has said to him, "I don't care who you get. I need at least 2 players into this club that I can fresh blood that can come into this club." And like Jack said, if they can come in on the ground straight in and just do what they got to do and gel with the players and get the team coasting. I mean, we're 4 games in hand over West Ham, right? And we're 3 odd points behind them. So if we win, potentially with them extra 2 players, we're already gaining momentum and we just got to push on. So I think personally, deep down, I think Paratici is doing all he can, right? The phone companies are absolutely loving him, obviously, because he's always on his phone. So he's doing his hardest. And like I said, I don't think we're going to have an empty window. I think something will happen, whether we get a loan or 2 play or buy someone. But I think we will get 1 or 2 players in because Conte will not be happy if we don't get anyone. And slowly but surely, I think Paratici is doing something. He's having an effect somewhere in that club. It's just that we don't know what, because everyone's looking at the negatives, or he's not bought anyone. And like Mike said, his job is not just to buy players. There's other stuff going on that he needs to concentrate on, develop, and maintain and take it further. So
to be fair, I don't want him to make transfer mistakes like we've made in the past. We went through a list of players that we talked about in the last show, and there was a 30 odd players, and we had the likes of Clinton NG, Georgian Kudu, Gedson Fernandez on the list. You know what I mean? Vincent Janssen, players like that who should be nowhere near the Spurs squad, but were bought. So there's been mistakes made. I'm hoping that mistakes are rectified. And if that means that we choose players wisely and we don't necessarily go for this, we need to get players, I'm happy for that. However, if Conte comes out and says certain things in the press and that's not given to him, because, you know, he's very honest in what he does and he doesn't hold back necessarily in what he says in the press, which is good and bad. It has its positives and it has its negatives. But if he comes out and says something, surely, you know, he has to be backed in that sense, which moves us nicely into the last section of the show, which will be about the man, the myth, the legend himself, Daniel Levy. And I'll start with you, Darius. Is this a case of same old, or has things changed sufficiently that you've seen to make you believe that Spurs are heading in a better direction in terms of transfers?
Well, if it was in the court of law and you had to sort of supply evidence, it wouldn't look very good for the people who think there has been change, because normally we are known to sort of leave things very late and shop in markets that maybe we don't have to always necessarily go for, maybe go for the second and third choices. But at the same time, I kind of feel like I am being a little bit silly to make that decision until the end of the window, because we all knew January was going to be tough. And as much as I do want to see 3 or 4 players come in, I always will admit, and always will hold my hands up and say, if there is not a guarantee, but if you know that you can get better players in the summer, better quality for a better price, there's no point in rushing your dealings. There's no sort of reason to shop just because you need players in that position. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And given that, the only reason why I'm so sort of a bit nervous and thinking, okay, we do need to get at least 2 players, maybe 3 in January, is because of the opportunity that the league has presented to us and sort of the teams that are around us and the priorities that they might have and the opportunity to actually sneak into 4th place. But really and truly, we looked at the start of this season, I don't think any of us even thought we were going to get into 6th place. So to say that we're I know 4 games behind, but 4 games in hand with Leicester, Burnley, can't really remember the other 2, sorry, off the top of my head, but games that I expect us to win. I really do. Arsenal, another one. I really do expect us to sort of be challenging for that top 4, not being in Europe anymore. And Chelsea, Chelsea potentially could drop into that race. Arsenal again are the only team around us who aren't playing more than 2 games a week. I know Man U are in the Champions League and West Ham are in Europa League. So the opportunity for you to bring in a couple players to upgrade your team is there, and you can almost guarantee top 4. So then in the summer, that market is going to be a lot easier to shop in when you can offer that sort of the players Champions League football. But at the same time, it's very hard for me to make any sort of judgment, like we've all said, so early on into these guys' tenure. And I know Levy's been here a long time and nothing's really changed with him. But at the same time, I have sort of seen a lot more delegation go to Paratici, and I do want to see sort of after this window and after summer how much he's actually been given, because I think that'll be a real sort of, after this summer gone, I think we'll really be able to see sort of how much money and how much he's actually going to back his manager and his director of football, because I do think he does have the final decision. That is one thing I'll always hold, is that he will have the final say. Even if Paratici says, I've agreed this deal, I think Levy will always be like, yeah, I need to double check that. And I guess that will never change. So
I'll ask Mike, what do you think ENIC and the board have to do to convince the fans that things have changed? And if you just a lot of people say spend money.
I was going to say the easiest.
I'm not convinced that just spending money is what's going to solve Spurs' problems, because, as I said, we've spent money. We need an infrastructure change, in my opinion. That infrastructure change is what's going to at least give us the building blocks to have permanent change.
We need a vision. That's the problem. I think that's what Spurs lack.
100%.
We lack a vision.
So is that the main thing you think that Daniel Levy needs to put in place?
I think it's one of the main reasons. One of the main things he needs to do is put us Spurs fans always second guessing Daniel Levy. We don't know really what's going on in his mind. He might give out the odd interview here, but the timing of the interviews, you could argue, is always seems to be around when he's getting a bit of flack. But I think he needs to set a clear vision of where he sees Tottenham and the direction he wants to take Tottenham. Not off the pitch, because we know what he's doing. He's buying. We can see him buying up properties and buildings and golf courses and stuff. We get that vision off the pitch with. You can clearly see there's something with the NFL that he's got his mindset on. What with buying up the golf club up in North London, etc. But on the pitch, he needs to set the vision as to where he wants Tottenham to be, realistically, say for the next between now and in 5 years' time. What is his expectations for us on the pitch? And then once we know the vision, I think we'd all kind of have a better understanding of the direction and how long it might take us to get to where he wants or where he thinks we should be. And I think the fans might be a little bit more on board with what we're seeing on the pitch, because there has been occasions where, like Enes Mora, Morecambe, etc., where there's been lackluster sort of performances. And you could argue defeats as well with Mora. But I think if there is a clear vision, a clear direction of where we're going on the pitch, I think fans would be more on board of where we are at the moment in terms of from a patience perspective. But going forward, it kind of sets our expectations as to what we can kind of think we'll see on the pitch, and how quick we'll develop as a team, as a squad, and what we potentially would challenge for. Because we're all going for, we can be challenging for top four. And I think Sid mentioned that we've got 3 or 4 games over West Ham. We've actually got, from what I'm led to believe, if my stats are right, I believe we've now got 5 games over Chelsea, who is
4.
What,
they played 22, we played 18. We can go.
They not just played tonight. Is that included tonight? Because I thought it's 4 games, but they've played tonight, haven't they, against Brighton?
Chelsea
yeah, they played Brighton tonight, so they probably played 19 after Brighton.
We played 4 games less 20, than Chelsea.
Yeah.
Mike, 5 games, you're right, 5 games.
After
tonight,
After tonight, it's 5 games, yeah. So 5 games in hand, and we're not...
Yeah.
How many points are we off them?
They're 46, we're 33, so we're 13 behind them at the moment.
So in 4 games, for 5 games, we've won all our games. Technically, you could argue that would get there. But this is where, like, our expectations are, if we're in the next 5 games, we could get in top 4. But realistically, we know that's not going to happen. But as I say, I think he just needs to set the vision. That will then naturally set our expectations, because we'll know roughly where we are with his vision and stuff. And just like you said, and the obvious thing here would be, and the first answer on the top of everyone's tongue would be, well, spend some money, Levy, bring some of these top players that we want to get, that we know would upgrade the squad and help us challenge for silverware, etc. But whether that happens or not, I don't know. But that's what I think he probably should sort of allude to.
Okay, and I definitely agree. The vision is important. Let me ask Jack another question. Jack, being a journalist and a very good one at that, if you had one question to ask Daniel Levy about the situation, the circumstances, what would it be that you would ask him?
It's good question. What would I ask Daniel Levy? I guess I'd ask him, how much are you going all in to win right now, or are you still building for the future? Because that's really the big question, I think, at the moment is, I think that it feels to me like Tottenham are just kind of going all in for now. They've been building for a long time. It had years and years of building and building and building for the future. New training ground, new stadium, Pochettino, young players, all that stuff. But it feels to me like that's not really how Tottenham are operating anymore. So I wonder if and I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder whether or not this summer we'll see older players coming into Tottenham rather than younger players. We'll see, big salaries, short-term contracts, and just people to get them over the line and help them to win in the short term. Because that's not really been the Tottenham way. And even if you look at the kind of, they've tried getting exciting young players, and it's not. I think they've been a bit unlucky, because I think Ndombele obviously hasn't worked out, but he's a very talented player. Lo Celso, I think, is a really good player, but he keeps getting injured. Bergwijn, I think, is a good player. but that's not quite worked. Sessegnon, I think, is a good player, but that hasn't worked. So they've tried getting young, talented players in, and for whatever a combination of reasons, and I think it's quite a complex picture, it hasn't worked. So I just wonder if this summer they might see a little bit of a change in direction and think, you know what, when Conte was at Inter, as the guys were saying earlier, it was Ashley Young, it was experienced players. It wasn't, trying to get a 23-year-old who might be good in 5 years' time. It was getting a 29-year-old who's good right now. And and if you're going to get Conte as manager, like Conte's not going to be there in 4 years' time. We all know that. He's only got another 18 months left of his contract. There's a 1-year option. Maybe that'll get triggered, but he's not going to be there for the long, long, long term. Mm. And if you've got Conte, you might as well just try and win with Conte, because whoever comes after Conte is not going to be as good as Conte. We know that. It's only downhill after Conte. So I just wonder, with that in mind, whether we might see a little bit of a change of strategy in the transfer market this summer, get some older players in, build a team to try and win something next season and the season after. Because if you don't do that now, you're not going to do it in 5 years' time.
I agree. I think that's a really good point what Jack makes, just on sort of even slightly, you could even disagree slightly, just because of look at what Inter are doing at the moment now, even with Simone Inzaghi involved. It's Conte leaves his squad in a good position, fitness wise and quality wise, and I even think, yes, what you're saying, the next manager that's coming is not going to be on his level, but I still think that the squad and the way that they play will still be at the level. And if you get somebody in who's maybe not obviously a significant drop off to Conte, who can competently operate a system that he has, how he did do with the team, you could still sort of be challenging for those trophies and still have a good enough squad.
Let me just stop you there. I just want to ask this. It just comes from, if because this is what I'm saying about the philosophy and all the vision and all the rest of it which touched on. You've got someone like Conte has got a very specific way of playing, very specific vision of his football, and we know he's not going to be there for the long term, as Jack said. He's not going to be there for 4 or 5 years. He's going to potentially be there for another 2 years. Do we as Spurs, as the board as Spurs, need to then decide, right, do you follow suit with a similar type of manager, or because of the players that you're going to get for Conte are going to suit what he wants to do? So if we talk about players of now, that might be the 29, 30, 31, whoever they might be, might not fit in 2 years' time if you don't succeed. So are we just going to be doing this kind of like rebuild Chelsea type model without success? Or is there a point where you think, right, if we get that success, how do we maintain it if Conte's not there?
Well, I'll just say this, and then I would like to hear what everyone else says. I just think that there's coming a point in time with this Tottenham team now where even after these 2 years, let's say this 2 years if Conte is gone, and you look at sort of the ages of the players who we've kept, who have been there for a long time, the ones that we want to stay, like Lloris's, like Sons and Kanes, these guys are going to be pushing north of 30 now, and you're going to have to think about sort of replacing these players anyway. So for me, this is sort of like the last hurrah with this squad that you can potentially try and win a trophy with them, and Conte's the ideal person to do it. I think even if it doesn't work out, I think there's going to have to be a complete overhaul sooner or later with even the mainstays in the squad, just because they are getting to a point where they won't be able to play every single game at 33 unless their bodies are as healthy as they are. We know Kane's got a history of injuries, so I think there's a real big sort of inevitable rebuild happening that we won't be able to escape from coming soon. But there's still 2 years left in a lot of these, 2-3 years left in a lot of these players, and I think the best man to try and get a trophy out of them is Conte. So I just think you sort of do what Conte says at the moment, and you will have to sort of, like you said, Sam, I think come up with a new philosophy or a new style of play after that anyway, just because of the amount of players that I think will be going far past their prime and potentially even considering retirement or going off to, America or the Middle East potentially. So I think there's a rebuild that's going to happen in the next 3-4 years anyway that we're going to have to deal with.
Okay. I'm going to come around and ask all of you then. This is the final part then. I'll start with you, Sid. Do you think this is going to work? Is this last chance saloon for ENIC and the board, or how much time do you give them for this next part of our history?
You know what? I'm just going to say something before I answer that one on what Darius and Jack were saying. You know, they were saying he's only got 18 months and he's got maybe an extension for 1 year, right? Why can't we, instead of that extension to the 1 year, why can't Daniel Levy say, you know what, I'm not going to give you 1 year, I'm going to give you 3 years, because you started a project, right? I'm going to back you in the summer. You've got your players. Yes, the players are going to get older, like Darius is saying. But like Man City, like Liverpool, like Chelsea, every summer I'm going to let you upgrade 1 or 2 players. So constantly we're evolving, getting rid of the older players and bringing in not young players, but quality players at a good age. So every summer, every January window, I'm just going to keep giving you extra players. You get rid of the old, and we just evolve that way. And I'll give you an extra contract. So we won't need to worry about a new manager because Conte might say, okay, that's a good idea. Let's do what City are doing. Let's do Liverpool. Let's do Chelsea. And every season, your squad is going to keep rotating. Forget what's happened in the past, not rotating at all. So it could work that way. It's a possibility. Everyone keeps going on about he's going to 1 year left, he's gone. I don't know. If he's doing well, why not give him a 3-year contract? But in terms of ENIC, I personally don't think Daniel Levy is going anywhere soon unless somebody like Bezos or Zuckerberg or whoever comes in with a stupid offer. Conte obviously has got something in his mind and he wants the player. So I think Conte is going to say to him, look, I signed for this club because I want to bring success. You have to give me the players. I'm not asking you for 500-600 million every summer window. Just keep rotating me with X amount of money, 100 million or whatever, and I'll bring you the success as long as you give me the players. And if ENIC agree to that and give the money, then I can't see why it can be a successful partnership because you've got the best manager in the world. You've got to trust that manager and trust the process and allow him to do his job. And I think it could work.
Jack, do you see this as a successful partnership or tri-partnership, whatever you want to call it? And is this the last chance saloon for ENIC and the board?
It's not the last chance saloon because they will still be here. They're not. ENIC and Daniel Levy own the club, and until they get offered enough money that they want to sell the club or part of the club, they will still be here. So whether Conte is a success or a failure, or whether he walks, or who knows, under any circumstances, Levy will still be there. Will it be? Is it a good combination? Well, I hope so. I mean, he's the best manager that Levy has appointed during his 21 years at Tottenham. He is at the top of his game. And if Conte can't get it to work, it's not Conte's fault because we know that Conte succeeds everywhere else that he has worked. So I can't tell you that Tottenham are going to win the league or even that Tottenham will get back in the top 4, but they've got the best possible man to give them the best chance. And if it doesn't work out, then it will be for reasons other than Conte himself.
Spot on with that. Mike, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll probably echo what Jack says there. I can't see, regardless of Conte's fate, whether it's good, bad, or whatever, I can't see Daniel Levy going. I can't see Joe Lewis selling unless an attractive offer comes in. And when you're talking about a £1 billion, I say club, business, franchise, whatever you want to call it now, finding someone or a firm in this current sort of climate that we find ourselves in, that's not going to be easy to do. I mean, I can't remember how much Spurs is valued at, but we're talking in the billions. So I echo very much what Jack says. I think Levy will be around for some time. Unless an attractive offer comes in.
Unless that Amazon money comes in. Darius, final thoughts from you.
I think that I understand sort of the panic from people, sort of how they think that this will never change and Conte won't be back. But at the same time, I also do think with a manager like Conte, a lot of things can turn quite quickly and a lot of sort of people's opinions on the situation. If Conte does sort of get a couple of players in and sort of maybe potentially win a trophy, might change the sort of trajectory quite steeply. So I absolutely love Antonio Conte. I've got nothing to fault the guy at the moment. He's made a few decisions sort of with the team and maybe with the substitutions that you could question, but for the most part, he's turned some players that I would have thought never would have even got into the team squad, let alone be mainstays in the 11. People like Ben Davis, people like Winks, even Sanchez has covered Romero pretty fine. He's got those players playing pretty much out their skin. So I just always think if you can do it with them guys, you give him better players. What are the levels that he can reach with Tottenham? And you can only see that happen if you actually let him do that, and if you actually give him the sort of tools to allow that to happen. So I want Conte to have a fair crack at the whip. I want him to have the players that he wants. I want him to be given enough to actually maybe challenge for what he wants to challenge for, and see what happens after that. Regardless, I think, like Jack said, I don't really think anybody will blame Conte for what happens if it goes badly, and that's why I sort of think he's in a good position to sort of do as good as he wants, because he can almost call the shots, and I think that he's in a position to use that power to maybe get a few ways, because I think, like you said, if it goes badly with Conte, it's going to be very, very bad within the club for the fans and just towards the board in general. So I think it is a last chance saloon, in my opinion, for these guys. They'll still be here, but there just would be no sort of rectifying any relationship.
Even if it goes bad though, and Spurs were to, or the board were to put the club up for sale, you got to find someone. Like you got. Do you know what I mean?
They aren't going to go. It's not even necessarily. Yeah, they're going to go. I just think that the relationship will never be able to be mended if you don't give Conte a fair crack at this whip, because he's proven that he is the guy to do it, and I think everybody has been convinced by that now. And I know for a fact that after seeing Nuno and seeing the levels that Conte's brought in, this man just needs the right players, and he can do some pretty amazing things. We
should maybe revisit this after the end of this window to see what people's thoughts are, because I think there's going to be a lot of vocalness, if that's the right phrase, from a lot of the fans if things don't go according to plan. It's been a really good show, guys. There's still there's 80 of you watching still. So if you're still with us, please hit that like button now. Smash that like button. It really helps us with the channel, really helps us to grow, and it shows us your support as well. Thank you all for the comments as well. If you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell as well. Jack, tell the viewers where they can find you if you would like to do that.
So you can find me at Jack Pitbrook on Twitter. You can read my stuff at theathletic.com. You can hear my podcast, The View from the Lane, which you should be able to find easily enough. It's not just me. My colleague Charlie Eccleshare also covers Tottenham, as well as many of our other writers. So there's a lot of written Tottenham content every day on The Athletic.
Brilliant. And it is a really good read. So those of you who haven't had a chance to go over and check that out, really is really good. And we appreciate you being on the show for us, Johnny.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's been great. There's a couple more comments here. So we've got this comment here from Paul Russell. I have a horrible feeling Levy feels he can get Poch back, so he won't back any manager. Poch, though, will go to Man United. Another mess up by Levy. People saying great show. Tom Lowry. Let's not forget Joe Lewis is a very old man. So I'm not sure what he's trying to say.
He might not comment though. He's 84. So
84, yeah.
I mean, this is something
he might leave all the money in his will. He might have left it all to Spurs.
To who? Daniel Levy?
I mean, he's worth. What's he worth? Is it 4.7 billion? I think
something like that.
Give around that. Between 4 and 5 billion, he's worth. I mean, it'd be nice if he wrote Spurs into his will and just left us £1 billion to do as we want with the club. Not us the fans, but the board and stuff. And but it's a good point. That might, if anything happened to Joe Lewis, and obviously I don't wish that at all. But if anything did happen, like what would happen to Spurs? Does his family then take over? I don't know what happened. It's a good question. And
it's all in that will. It's all in that will, which I'm sure none of us will ever see. But as I said, thank you, guys. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Darius. Thank you, Sid, and especially to Mr. Jack Brooks. Thank you very much for tonight. It's been great again. Look forward to the game tomorrow. Leicester City, if it's still on. We haven't found anything out as yet, so we're assuming the game's still on. Has there been a game called off tonight? There was a game called off tonight, was it?
Burnley game, wasn't it? I think Burnley playing Watford. I think that got called off.
But Arsenal are putting an offer to postpone our game tomorrow anyway.
Okay. Jack, you're being asked by Toxic Hedgehog, is Traore coming?
Not yet. I think it's more. I'd say it's probably. I think I'd probably give it a bigger than 50 chance of happening. I think it's likelier to happen than to not happen. But they haven't done the deal yet. You know, they're trying to find a way to make it work. Whether that's going to be a loan with an option, perhaps. They're trying to send Matt Doherty back there. So they're not there yet. They're working on it, but you know, there's still a long way to go. It's only the 18th.
Some people are saying it's 18 days too long, but we're very, very impatient as Spurs fans. I think you've got to leave these guys until the actual end of the window. And as I said, I don't think necessarily this is going to be the major window for us. It's not going to be, but summertime is where I believe we can really judge how this relationship between these three is really going to work. Right. Mike, Darius, Sid, and Jack, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And